at 10, 11, 10, 12. President Lisa McGonigal, Bill McGowan, Rod Hoffman, Paul Kearse, Wayne Sawchuk, and Dan Coughlin. I think the order of the day is to basically go over the final draft and hopefully march on from there. Rod, do you want to kick us off just for?
Sure. In reviewing the final version, came up, and I've called Jeff to give him a heads up. The provision in section 1.1 C, I think it is, about payment, developer picking up the commission's costs. The original draft and drafts through almost to the end provided that the developer was to reimburse the commission for all of its costs in connection with this agreement, including, well before an application was made formally, because we had commission had developed this connection agreement, and that language got changed recently, and frankly, I missed the change, but the change was not anything the commission had ever considered, and it's an issue, and because all of this has been gone through commission at significant expense, both my time and Dan's time, to work this out. And so what I thought was the final execution copy is not, because it does not address that appropriately.
What section? 1.3, what paragraph?
It's C, and it's on page 4 of the agreement.
1.1.
Yeah, and
1.1. Okay.
the last time I went through these last night, and the last time I saw it was the one that I could find was March the 1st was in there, and then as I didn't go through every one of them because I didn't have them all with me, but in July, somewhere between March and July, it changed. And while it's, in my opinion, it sort of says the same thing, it is kind of ambiguous. And I think it might be open to interpretation. Again, if we're not around, when another board is here or has to, do something with this. I like the other language because it was just very simple, just bang, this is what it is. I don't know, Paul.
Can I say something, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Yeah, that language was inserted in the month of July. And the reason why it was inserted was because the board expressed that it was unable to consider our application and our plans until such time as the agreement was executed, and therefore then at which point we would have had the right to tie in. And so we had filed an application which was accepted but not formally accepted. We had provided a check, which I received a letter saying we're not going to cash, we're going to deposit it into a safe until the agreement is executed. And so my position was, well, if you're not going to consider the application or the plans until such time as the agreement is executed and the check is not going to be cashed, then the funds should be used to pay for review that incurs following the execution of the agreement. And that's why I put that language in there. And even though that's contrary to the document that had been previously provided up until that time, I think that's the fair way of proceeding in light of the fact that the board made those, had expressed what it expressed to me. So I'd ask the board to consider just keeping the language as is. Donald already signed the document. I had already received an email from correspondence with Rod that that the language was acceptable. We've delivered the document to the town manager's office. I'm sure that you have his signature on it at this point. And, you know, we've been at this. There were probably 6 or 7 iterations of the document that occurred after the language was proposed to be amended, and there was no word to me that it was unacceptable. I think at the last meeting, I heard the board vote to accept everything except the changes that we were about to make after the last meeting, which we promptly made. So I think at this point, the language should just stay as it was yesterday.
I disagree. I think that there is a presumption by the board, at least in my opinion, a presumption by the board that unless something comes up and is outlined and bolded and said, hey, we've changed this, we shouldn't be the ones to find a change. If you've inserted language into this, it would have been at the very least common courtesy to say, hey, I changed this and these are the reasons why.
I did do that, actually.
I don't remember that, but anyway, I just think that again, I'm going to go back to whoever the successors are to this board. I think it's our duty to give them the most clear, easily interpretable agreement without having to go back through, 3 or 4 years of back and forth, and to say, this is what it is. And I just find it, I find it a bit confusing, that's all. And when I went through it last night, I'm like, wait a second, I don't remember this. Now,
yeah, I mean, just to go back, I mean, one of the original meetings when Mr. Stasko was there was basically his commitment to indicate that he'd pay to get the agreement put together. And I think from that perspective, the commission and its lawyers and engineers operated in good faith on that basis. So to go back now and say, well, we're not gonna reimburse the town for what they've spent previously, I think is not operating in good faith either.
Okay, Mr. McLaughlin, this is Mr. Stasko.
Yes.
I've gone over all the Zoom meeting minutes, and you just made a statement that is not true. I never made that. I've listened to every Zoom meeting. I've gone back through all of them, and I never made that statement. And I take offense to you to say that I made that statement.
Okay, my recollection is that you did make that statement.
Well, we could go back over the meeting minutes and you can listen to them.
This is the first meeting, which is several years ago.
Then I think you owe me an apology.
Well, I mean, my recollection is that you made that statement. We've discussed it in that format in previous meetings too, I believe.
But your recollection is wrong. I've spent hours upon hours going through every Zoom meeting. And you and I can sit down and go over them, and you can see your recollection is not correct.
It wasn't a Zoom meeting. It was in the presence of the board.
Well, is it in the meeting minutes?
I don't know if we have that, to be honest with you. I mean, we have,
if it's in the meeting minutes,
it'd probably be on the tape.
It's part of the record or the tape.
It'd be on the tape. Did you listen to all the tapes, Don?
No, I've never been privileged to those.
That's probably why you don't recall.
yeah, and I have to say that Mr. Stasko, I do remember a statement. I don't to the effect that this was one of the first meetings that was held back at Wilcott Commons. I think that were probably 2 administrators ago. And there was a mention about, and it was in a preliminary, and I've actually mentioned it in one of these Zoom calls, I don't know which one, that basically you made the statement that if we did this was during one of your applications as to either Sawyer Street or to go over the Peppermint Brook expansion, that you would pay for everything. It wouldn't cost the town a cent. And I do remember that, and I suspect that somewhere, I don't know how productive that would be to go back and go through all of this stuff, given the fact that we are now, on the edge of the diving board, ready to do this, but, that's my recollection.
Let me understand something. Is the intention to take the $20,000 and pay the legal and engineering incurred by the board since what day? Like, in other words, how far back are we going? We go into the application when the check was written. That would potentially seem to be fair. But are we going back years before the application was filed? We spent an inordinate amount of time dealing with what are the Title V design flows for this property. And it was, I thought, simple math. And at the end of the day, we came down to what are the Title V design flows. There definitely were some complexities along the way. But I'm trying to understand what the intention is as far as the amount of reimbursement, how far back it goes, Bill.
I think it would go back to this is my opinion, I think it would go back to the time that there was obviously a period of time where we had the application for Sawyer Street, the application for Chief Justice Cushing Highway, and the application for Peppermint Brook, and all of those were basically given a negative vote by the board. Whenever it was re-engaged by the town coming to us and asking us to get back into it, I think it would be reasonable to presume that that's when the clock would start ticking, not before.
Okay, I have never filled out an application, never have filled out an application. If you can show an application with my signature on it, I've never filled out an application into the one that I filled out where you accepted the check. Never have filled out an application.
Didn't say you did.
So the question I really have is, Bill, is the agreement does state that he's to reimburse the town for all expenses. And the question is, starting at what date, apparently in your mind? The question I really have is, prior to me attending the board, the complaint was that the applicant, it never came before the board, walked around town, talked about how he wants sewer, but never came in front of the board. So I know that the town applied for a grant last year that would encompass CJC and other aspects of that Sawyer Street connection, but that was at the sole expense of the town putting that together. So I'm not sure exactly what expenses that the sewer commission would have entailed if he never applied for anything, you've never reviewed anything. Certainly you've discussed a lot of potential applicant coming in front of the board, but the board pays every month for normal consulting with Mr. Coughlin and his firm. The board pays every month for legal attendance to all of our meetings, and it's not specific to any subject matter, it's whatever subject matter comes up. So I'm wondering, what expenses are we looking for specific to this that would have occurred at some point where you think we started discussing this seriously? Is that like in 2019 or 2020? And then, so we never reviewed an application, so Dan had no expenses to that. I know Rod has legal expenses based on the agreement and how many reiterations we went through.
Well, I'm not going to get into the numbers because I don't think that would do us any good right now, but I would say that at a certain point in time, certainly there were specific costs that were incurred by Rod putting this agreement together, and by Dan looking at the various permutations of how we would actually put this thing together. And then they would have been over and above, and we have been tracking their time, both of them, for this specific project. I can't tell you how long it's going back, but it's got to go back at least a year, probably a year and a half. And
right. So basically, when we drafted an agreement, that's basically when the clock started.
It might have been a little before, but yeah, somewhere in that area. Yeah, I mean, I think when we started looking at this agreement, which has to be a year old, from all the different iterations we have of it. That's
right, because the intent was to draft an agreement and execute it within a reasonable period of time, and unfortunately, the period of time took longer than we all anticipated. So you're saying the expenses would have occurred when we started drafting the agreement and negotiating with Jeff on.
That
how
would have been, to me, that would have been a reasonable time frame. Yes.
Okay. And Rod, is that something you agree with, Rod, or?
Yes, the first I started working on this, I believe, Dan sent me an outline of an agreement, and I started drafting a connection agreement and have billed a separate account for that ever since, and bill it separately from my other day-to-day sewer commission matters.
Right.
Can I-
So we entered mutually into an agreement to get sewer. So if it never was executed, then we would have paid those expenses to you in the normal course of business. And now that the agreement appears to be ready for execution, then those expenses, according to the terms in section 1, would occur. Is that correct then?
Yeah.
So Jeff, it appears both parties entered into a mutual agreement to get this thing going, even though an application wasn't applied for. It was understood that the agreement would have to be in place before the submission of an application, as best I can understand it.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a good summary, because a lot of this is ground that the town has never hoed before. I mean, this is pretty much an expedition. So I think that's probably reasonable to say that. And again, I just go back to my original thing. I think that the insertion of the $20,000 and the $10,000 is just, it could be misleading to somebody looking at this later on in life. That's my thought on this. Lisa, is Wayne hearing this at all?
Wayne, are
Yes,
you on?
Yes, I am.
What do you think, Wayne?
I think that, first of all, I don't have a clue as to how much money we're even dealing with. And it would really be nice to say, so far, $18,153 is being sought for the work that's been done, starting at the point when we started negotiating the deal. And I sort of agree with both, certainly with my colleagues. So, and I think Donald probably wants to say, what are we talking for money? If it was a reasonable amount of money, he probably would say, okay, that makes sense. But don't forget, guys, I have my legal fees that I have to pay. So, so I guess my point is, I don't think it should start at the day that the application that went in, if in fact all the work was done prior to that for the purpose of filing an application.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable if we do it when this agreement started. When we started sort of putting this together, because that's, I mean, in my opinion, that's when the heavy lifting was really going on. The original meetings that we had at Wilcott Common, and then even at the town hall, were more exploratory. We really weren't doing anything. Now we have been.
Yep. I don't think, Rod, when did you start calculating this as a separate item? It was last 12 months or less.
I don't know, before that.
It was probably March of 2020. I think it was right before COVID hit that we had.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, somewhere in there.
But to Paul's point, I mean, a good there was a meeting then, there was a draft of an agreement that was circulated, and then there was no response to that draft until this year, probably around April of this year or so, I believe. It just kind of sat there, and the reason is because the town was pursuing the grant application. Donald had committed to paying the engineering that would have been associated with a portion of that, I believe, for a sewer extension that is different than the sewer extension that is proposed in this application. And so while we had discussions, and a lot of our discussions centered on what is the fee and is it a public or a private line, nothing really was done, to my knowledge, with the review of the plans until the spring of this year. At which point, when the statement was made by Dan, well, we need to have an agreement before we can even consider any of this, that's when the application was filed. In order to kind of bring what I perceive to be discussions that seemingly were occurring between Dan and Rod and maybe one of the members of the commission, but not the entire commission, in a public forum. The reason for one of the main reasons why I filed the application was to bring it into the public forum so we could be privy to all of that. So, you know, I could understand fees related to the draft of the agreement. I could understand fees related to attendance at particular hearings discussing that, but a lot of what may or may not have occurred, and that, you know, I haven't seen what you're talking about. So you know, it seems very broad and open-ended for something that, you know, kind of took on a life of its own over a period of time that didn't have anything to do really with, you know, redrafting and editing of an agreement, basically.
So I can tell you that what's published on the town website under the sewer department is a draft agreement dated 6/18/20.
That sounds about right.
So
I have records on-
we have an agreement that's been published on the town website. It says revised draft 6/18/20. So at that point, it had been dormant with the sewer department because there was no application submitted. So I don't know, since June 18th of 2020, if we specifically had Rod and his team reviewing an agreement and negotiating with you over the last 12 months or 18 months or prior to the application coming in, I guess are the expenses we were looking at. And those would be expenses that were in addition to his normal expenses that he attends all these meetings.
Separate from, yeah.
No,
Yeah.
we have been doing, and I think it's probably somewhere in the 10-month to 12-month period of time.
I have records going back to January of 2020 that started on the agreement.
Yeah, and then we've been asking for, we've been separating out both Dan and Rod's, anything that is, well, from specific to CJC, and then any other general expense. So we've been tracking that so that we know.
Yeah,
what it is.
the first agreement in my inbox that was sent to me was sent to me in an email on June 19th of 2020. And it referenced the meeting yesterday, meaning June 18th. That
would tie in with what's
that's the
published.
first document I have. Yeah.
So that ties in with the first document that's published on the town website of June 18th, 2020.
Yeah.
My first draft, I think, is February 10th.
I wish I'd have known that you were considering it so early.
Well, again, this is, I think, prior to you becoming involved, Jeff. We had 3, if not 4 meetings looking at 3 specific alternative sites.
Bill, I can remember the day I got involved with Donald. It was it's unforgettable, but it happened much sooner than that. And I just say that.
No, that's fine. I mean, I'm just saying.
With a smile, because he tends to leave a lingering effect in his wake with me. So
So I would just tell you that what I was referring to is the first time that I saw you on one of these meetings. So you may
Yeah.
have been with him years before that. And I didn't know.
right, yeah, he went to the meeting, and this kind of ties into your recollection, Bill. We had initially proposed doing a crossing over Peppermint Brook or over town property. And that was an informal discussion, I believe, with the board. He requested a hearing in advance of filing a citizen's petition with the selectmen. I don't think any particular vote was taken at that hearing, but there was a subsequent selectmen's meeting where the indication was pretty strong that the selectmen were not too keen on that concept. And therefore, we never went ahead. We withdrew the citizen's petition. And then that kind of like stopped right there. And then it didn't get kind of brought back up, to my knowledge, with you until the spring of 2020. But I've said what I need to say about this. I would like to see the invoices. I'd like to see the detail to understand what we're paying for. And my final statement on this is going to be basically, we're paying for the extension with no guarantee of a reimbursement from anybody. And we're paying for the fee. And we're gracious. We're thankful to the commission for giving us the ability to pay that on a deferred pay plan. But that's what these fees are for, right? I mean, if they're not going to reimbursing you for the work, and if we're paying for everything under the sun to make sure that the review is complete and final and the inspections are done, what on earth is the town utilizing all this money for? So I would think that this would be a perfect example of something that the town could utilize, in the course of doing business, the review of an agreement like this until such time as we file an application. But
just a point of clarification, it's not the town's money, it's the sewer ratepayers' money.
Right.
And, as I know, we've said this back, this wasn't something that we've conjured up as a board to say, okay, let's go take sewer down to Chief Justice Cushing Highway. Any costs that we have, they're very scrupulously reviewed by our ratepayers. So, I mean, if we buy an extra paperclip, we probably get, a critique on that. I would tell you that that this is being watched quite a bit by the ratepayers, and I think we have a duty to take care of them. And you may say to us that we're making money on it, but we're not. I mean, this is the cost, I guess, of doing business, and I think we have been extremely fair and worked in a high level of good faith, an extremely high level of good faith in negotiating a fee down from north of $2 million to probably close to $1 million between the refiguring or recalculation of the actual sewer rate and the $250,000 deduction for affordable housing. These are all things that the board did to move this along in the best interest of the sewer ratepayers and the town. So I think these charges are warranted. I don't think we're going to can show you everything. I mean, there's nothing, we don't have anything to hide. It's a matter of public record. So, they are what they are. I think it's just a matter, we agree on what the starting point is. And it is what it is. We're not marking them up by any means. So.
I would agree with the starting point of June 18th of 2020. That's what's published and that's within the public domain. Anything prior to that would have been in our normal course of business of reviewing requests from any applicant. I don't think that the expenses were that huge between where Dan said he started in January to June. You're talking about 6 months. And when we are charging a $1.4 million privilege and hookup fee
minus
So it's-
250.
Well, I thought that the base was the one, so it's 1.2 million. So we're collecting 1.2 million in privilege and hookup fees, in which the applicant is paying 100% of the sewer line to be put in. So we do have the 1.2 million in fees that could be applied to whatever Dan thinks the cost was from January to June. And certainly the applicant can absorb the cost from June 18th on till today as part of that fee.
Well, I
We
take,
did ask for an extra $10,000 in escrow to cover additional expenses in addition to the $20,000 application fee.
I take a little bit of a different stance on this. I think that the original work that we did wasn't the heavy lifting that we've been doing since probably, say, December of 20. And I think at that point, looking, I keep a diary, and basically at that point I was taking more voluminous notes than I had been previously. And I'm using that as a way to say, you know, I for one was, and I'm sure the rest of the board, and at that time, I think it was just Wayne and I until you came on board, Paul. When did you come on? January?
Yeah,
Okay.
January this year, January 21. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the real heavy stuff came in, at least the way my notes show, November, December of 20, and then 21. And I think going back to 18 or whatever year it was. Again, those were more on the part of the applicant of exploring what our, you know, like, of course, it was a normal meeting. And we weren't really, there wasn't a whole lot of heavy lifting. And I don't think Rod, in fact, I know Rod wasn't even involved at that point. So,
So where do we come up with a start date of billing for the?
well, I think we'd have to, I think that the only thing that has changed in this courtship has been when Rod actually came on board.
That was January or February of 20.
Okay. So in that period of time, though, I just don't see the work effort being that. I mean, I don't see the work effort being that high at that, in those first, you know, few months of 20.
Okay, so if we, Rod, if you could give us a general idea. So, you know, we've got an agreement that has been executed on one side already. Are we talking about 5% of your total expenses so far were between, you know, January and June, or was it 50% of your expenses, you know, that kind of thing?
I'd say 20%.
Yeah, I mean,
because, you know, it was basically inventing a wheel
okay.
of the original agreement.
Okay, so we're talking about only about 20% of the expenses over the risk of not signing an agreement today and getting it implemented. I don't see that as a huge financial hardship based on what's presented to us in the agreement.
No, I don't either. And I think that if the board wants to do this, what I would suggest we do is go back to the original language, but put a start date of January 1, 21.
20.
So let's,
21.
why don't we read out what you would
21,
suggest?
because what,
21, yeah, okay.
21.
Could
Okay.
we just I'm gonna put Wayne back on. We lost Wayne for a little, so if you could repeat that, Bill, and so that if there's any votes, he can know what he's voting on.
Right. Let me just find my right thing here. Hold on. Yeah, so to go back to the, so again, and I don't know, Wayne, if he had heard my mention of the diary that I keep and all this, and that it really started getting.
I've been
Did you-
cutting in and out, but I have a good understanding of what it is, and it's primarily a date at which we would want to get reimbursement and have it agreeable to both sides.
Right. And I'm saying that, either say December of 20 or January of 21. We set the clock at that point.
So I would certainly say December then to be on a little bit. It should have been June or so based on the other discussions, but we do have to move on. The applicant has received, significant concessions from the board so far. I think the 250 that miraculously came by is certainly a fund that part of this money could come from.
Yep.
So why don't I, do you mind me proposing right here, right now, what consistent with what I think I'm hearing from the board, the language would be, so we can agree on it and move on.
Do you mind if I do it?
Sure, no, absolutely.
All right, I'm going to go back to the agreement dated the 11th of March of 21. And on page 4, what is it here? 1.2C, that pay all engineering, consultant, legal, and other fees reasonably incurred by the board in connection with this agreement, the sewer extension and sewer connection, and the application, such expense amount to be paid prior to the approval of the application. I'd say with the applicant, instead of prior, with, starting on December, say 15th, 2020.
Okay.
So rather than such expense amount to be paid prior to the approval of the application, I'm sorry, you're going to say costs reasonably incurred by the board since December 1st, 2020 in connection with this agreement.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Okay.
December 1st of 2020.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
Have a motion?
Yes. Can I have I'll make a motion that we agree what I just read. Can I get a second?
Paul Kears, second.
Bill McGowan. Okay, and let's do a roll call vote on this just for the record. Bill McGowan, agree.
Paul Kears, aye.
Great.
Wayne, can you just state your name and say it's because we can?
Yeah. Wayne Sawchuk, agree.
Okay.
So Rod,
Yep.
do you are we crystal clear on what that language is going to say? Because I'm going to ask you to send that over to me.
Let's you and I go over it separately.
Okay.
Just a point of clarification. I know we talked about some other clarifications in the document.
Yeah, I asked Rod to go over
Overall,
those.
this one went,
So Dan, I asked Rod to go over those with you because a lot of them were just, adding, I think they're more housekeeping stuff than, I saw that I think there was a spelling mistake or two in there. and a
well, there was
couple
some
of-
math errors too,
So
in the dollar amount actually. So
which one?
the large one. I mean, based upon the flows and based upon our calculations, the normal calculations that are conducted for this flow, we're looking at 1.163000 as a dollar value.
Versus what?
I need to get off the call for a couple of minutes. Wait.
Okay,
It's basically changed. 700, no, not even. Well, I take it back. It's a little over $100,000.
Yeah, but Dan,
Whose
Hold on.
favor does this go to?
Right now, it's in their favor. The correct calculation would basically be the amount of EDUs times 37,500. And I think in one of Jeff's early versions that he proposed the new numbers. I'm not sure what he was using for values, but it doesn't appear to calculate correctly.
So we have 37.67 EDUs. Are we agreed on that, Dan?
Yeah, I think we said we rounded up to 3768 or something.
I have 3767. That's what was in my exhibit. You asked me to provide that. That's what I provided. Times 37,500 brings us to $1,412,625. Less the $250,000 credit brings us to basically the number that you just indicated, Dan, which was $1,162,625. And what the agreement says is that the sum of $100,000 should be paid prior to commencement of construction of the sewer extension and sewer connection agreement, or not agreement, but prior to construction, okay?
Mhm.
So that leaves $1,062,625. So I think that's your $100,000 delta, if I'm guessing correctly.
Yeah,
Is that
no,
where-
it's, the delta isn't, yeah, it's not that. It's only $375 looking at it in comparison. I opened the other agreement.
Okay.
It's peanuts. It's just.
So what
around
are we-
there.
Are we talking about $375 right now?
Yeah, I think so. Peanuts.
Well, this, I don't know.
I think, you know, we voted on as the three commissioners and agreed to everything in that agreement, the way it is written. We came to a final agreement on the start date today. So anything in addition to this is, in my opinion, not subject to changing anything in the agreement, because we've already agreed to the agreement.
No, I agree. Absolutely. We're done.
There are provisions, obviously, as we start construction. There's going to be things that change that are unforeseen, or things that Dan has brought up that we obviously can take into consideration, and we can agree to what those changes are as we move forward. So I'm not, you know, discounting what Dan is saying. I'm just saying that the provision, especially in Article 2, which gives the board permission to, you know, evaluate and make recommendation and changes as they come up. So we were still covered there, Dan, to be able to do that.
Yeah, there's also the second last whereas basically talks about the flow being 21,720.
And like I said, we can address those once we agree to whether it's going to be, you know, force main or gravity fed. And once we get past that decision, then we can go through the rest of the agreement to see what the cause and effect of that decision is as we move forward to construction.
Right. My only point is it seems clarifications might be difficult. So didn't know if you wanted to bring them up at this point.
No, I think we're good. I think Wayne's not here, but I think we're good. We've already voted on it. We voted on it.
Right.
So as far as just mechanics are concerned, since Donald has already signed the agreement, I'm going to work with Rod to reach the consensus on the language, Bill, that you had just read and was voted upon. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Donald sign, initialize that one page, and I'm going to send that over to the town to swap out, and then you guys could execute what you execute, if that makes sense.
Rod,
Can we just have a clean copy and re-sign it? I mean, is that cumbersome?
Yeah.
Or?
That's fine. That's we'll do
'Cause
that.
I don't know who told, maybe Rod, I have to go sign it under like with a notary, right?
You do, yes. I've set it up for 3 commissioners to sign, but only Bill to be notarized.
Okay.
So-
So we're going to get you 4 original new copies. We'll ask Chris Senior to give us back the document we gave you. And there's no need for another meeting, am I correct?
I don't think so.
No.
Okay.
So is this something that could be, so I need to go to town hall tomorrow. Is this something I can sign tomorrow, Rod?
Yep.
You'll have it from us today, Paul.
Okay.
Yeah, I can sign it Thursday. I can be there Thursday morning, first light.
And it should be with Justine
Yep.
in the manager's office.
Yeah, okay.
She's the notary?
Tracy is?
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, I'll be there at 9 o'clock.
Well, thank you once again.
Is Wayne still on? Wayne,
He is not. Let me,
I know he's traveling, but if he could get this thing executed, then it would move to the next step for,
The agreement will be dated as of today's date.
okay.
Effective as of today.
hi, Wayne,
Hi.
we're wrapping up, so, somebody.
What- what-
an
Yeah,
update.
when can he sign the agreement? I'm gonna sign it tomorrow. Bill's gonna sign it on Thursday. When are you available to sign?
Anytime.
Okay,
And Lisa, will you tell him that he has to go to Justine and all that?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, did you hear that, Wayne? You have to go, see Justine in the manager's office?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, I'll make a motion to adjourn. I'll have a second.
Oh. Paul Kear, second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you, Wayne.
All right, thanks.
Wayne Scott, Chuck, aye.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you again.
Good, Wayne. Thank
Thank you.
you. Bye.
Sorry for all this technical
Thank you.
nonsense here.